Welcome in, everyone. I want to talk about the Chicago Bears head coaching vacancy. Matt Eberflus was relieved of his duties a couple of weeks ago back on Black Friday, not to be confused with Black Monday, which in NFL terms is the first day following the conclusion of the regular season, in which you typically see the majority of coaches who are going to be let go. It's formalized that they are fired. This season, we've seen probably more than what you typically would in terms of coaches being let go in progress of the current season. Robert Saleh of the Jets, Dennis Allen with the Saints, and, of course, Matt Eberflus with the Bears. The Bears fans wanted Eberflus out for a while, even going back to the end of last season. They just, I understand, and you could make some low-hanging fruit jokes of Eberflus, much like Greg Williams back in the day of Bountygate. When he came back, it's like Eberflus actually came back with the same team with a glow up, right? Changing the wardrobe a little bit, growing out the beard, but it did not change the Bears' course and their opportunity for, even with the number one overall pick in Caleb Williams and a bunch of offensive acquisitions, they are not going to the playoffs. I think you need a strong personality. Whoever is going to be the backfill in this head coaching position, you got to have a strong personality. You need a leader of men, someone in charge, who also has the capability of putting together a good staff. One thing I was looking at going back to last offseason, so from the 2023 season going into this 2024 season, there were a lot of key running game free agent acquisitions. J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards going to the Chargers. Joe Mixon going to Houston. Derrick Henry going to Baltimore. Aaron Jones, Minnesota. Saquon Barkley going to the Eagles. DeAndre Swift going to these Chicago Bears. Josh Jacobs, Green Bay. My point being, the running game has had a resurgence over these past couple of seasons, and you saw it especially this past offseason in terms of the number of big names who changed teams. But regardless of what side of the ball you are on, you have to have a presence. And the reason I bring up the running game and these big name running backs that we saw sign with new teams, there's an element of just being a tough guy that is associated with a successful rushing attack. And the Bears have not had that, and they really haven't for a few years now. Matt Eberflus was not a guy with a big presence. Going back to Mike Ditka, which is to say, 40 plus years ago, Ditka is the only Bears head coach to ever win a Super Bowl. Following him, here are the records, and I believe this includes postseason. Dave Wannstedt, 40-56. Dick Duran, 35-45. Lovie Smith, who, to his credit, did get the Bears back to a Super Bowl, although they ended up losing that one to Peyton Manning and the Colts in that rainy game in Miami. He went 81-63. Then after Lovie Smith, you had Mark Trestman, who went 13-19. John Fox, 14 34. Matt Nagy, 34-31. Again, the reason I think this includes the postseason is there was a year in which the Bears qualified for the playoffs. And that's why you have, back in Nagy's days, those were 16-game seasons. So 34-31 puts you at, one playoff game, which I believe they lost to the Saints. And then most recently, obviously, you have Eberflus at 14-32. The reason I talk about the need for a big presence is when you look around the league, there are certain guys who just resonate and have had success despite not being, and I know everyone's after, like, who's the hot shot, younger guy, play caller, offensive coordinator, guru, has, quarterback coaching in his background. Those guys are few and far between. They really are. If you look at the landscape right now, you could say Mike Tomlin, Dan Campbell, both Harbaughs, right? So John Harbaugh, who actually was the Eagles' special teams coordinator prior to getting the Baltimore head coaching position, as well as Jim Harbaugh, who, yes, he was a quarterback, but Jim Harbaugh is a tough guy. He understands the importance of running the football, of playing good defense, of having guys who are just, for lack of a better term, old school football players. And every one of those guys I just mentioned, those teams are, and look, you could say what you want about the Steelers or the Chargers, right? The Chargers got smoked against Baker Mayfield at home, by the way. They got smoked. They got embarrassed against the Buccaneers coming in on Sunday. Those teams are most likely, all four of them, they are going to make the playoffs. They all have elite programs. And I look at Vrabel, and this is going back a few weeks. This is from, let me look here, 6 Sports. Again, this is from a few weeks ago, so maybe these odds have changed. But here are the odds on the next Bears head coach. Ben Johnson plus 250, Joe Brady plus 425, Thomas Brown, who is the current interim coach, 700, Liam Cohen, 800, Aaron Glenn, 800, Kellen Moore, Cliff Kingsbury, Mike Vrabel, Josh McCown, all 1,100. And then Drew, hope I'm pronouncing this name right, Drew Petzing at 1,200. And then Brian Flores, Brian Dable, Marcus Freeman, all at plus 1,800. The Marcus Freeman one, are you kidding me? He has one of the best head coaching jobs, regardless of college or the NFL. He's the head coach of Notre Dame. They are in the playoff. That is, I mean, unless they're going to pay the dude $20 million, why would you, if you are Marcus Freeman, why would you leave Notre Dame to become the head coach of the Chicago Bears? But I don't want to get off track here, okay? So here are my no's, because I just said I think this vacancy, and I'll say this, and we'll talk about it on other episodes. I will promise you, of the 3 teams that have fired their head coach in season, the Jets, the Saints, and the Bears, not one of these interim head coaches will even have a chance. It is completely off the table that these guys will become, like the Antonio Pierce of this season and get long-term, or I shouldn't say long-term, but multi-year head coaching contracts. That is simply not going to happen. There is no way when you're talking about the next coach for the Chicago Bears, and if they make any one of these hires of this list that I'm about to exclude, then consider it, whether it happens next season, back half of next season, the season after that. You heard it here. You need a big personality. You need somebody with some cachet. So I would say of that list I just mentioned, I'm going no on Ben Johnson, no on Joe Brady, no on Thomas Brown, who is the current interim, no on Liam Cohen, Kellen Moore, Cliff Kingsbury, Drew Petzing, Brian Flores, Brian Dable, who we don't even know if he's going to be available, and Marcus Freeman, for the reasons I just mentioned. I think Vrabel is the guy. No doubt about it. If you are the Bears, you need to land him. He's at a plus 1,100. Vrabel is young, but he's already been a coach he has a decade of experience with being the linebacker and the defensive coordinator for the Texans. He actually started out in terms of his coaching career at Ohio State, which is his alma mater back in the Urban Meyer days. He was the head coach for the Tennessee Titans for 6 seasons. He made an AFC championship. He has won NFL Coach of the Year. Now, record-wise, and a big part of this was, if you look at the 2023 season, as a head coach, he's 54-45. He has a 2-3 record in the postseason. The reason I say he's the right guy for this job, he's a tough guy. As a player, he started his career with Pittsburgh, and then he played the majority of his career, 8 seasons, in New England. He missed a total of 3 games in that time. He won 3 Super Bowls as a member of the Patriots. Vrabel is rich. He has made a lot of money as a player and as a coach. I think for him, the opportunity is his number one priority. He's young enough to relate to the players and succeed in that area. He's shown that with the Titans. He's also accomplished enough as a head coach in the league to have sway, to have influence, to get the buy-in that is needed to get to where the Bears ultimately want to be. I believe he is the best head coaching prospect on the market, bar none. It is not one of these coordinators who I believe many of these guys are going to get their opportunity. Vrabel, I just think, is head and shoulders above them. And I think a perfect fit for Chicago. And there's no question he would have respect of the players. The issue lies in terms of the Bears with the reporting structure. Kevin Warren is this extra layer between, or maybe between's not the right word, but in most organizations, the head coach reports to the general manager and the general manager reports to ownership. With the Bears, from everything I've heard, there's kind of this expectation, and Kevin Warren has only been with the organization since 2023. There's this expectation that both the head coach and the general manager, I'm using the word report as the best adjective or verb, whatever. I'm not an English major, that I have. And if you go back to the way things ended in Tennessee for Mike Vrabel and his just general disagreement with the way the new general manager was running things, I cannot see, unless the Bears are willing to make some concessions on how this thing ultimately runs. If Mike Vrabel was not into the red tape, the bureaucracy of the Tennessee Titans, then why the hell would he be interested in adding a layer if he went to the Chicago Bears? So I think he is the fit for the Bears, but they would need to take some serious considerations in terms of what the reporting structure is, and if you want an elite coach, which I think Mike Vrabel clearly would be, then you cannot have this extra layer with Kevin Warren added to what Mike Vrabel would have to be dealing with. I've also seen, and we'll wrap up with this, Kevin Stefanski was floated out there. Now, he was not on this list in terms of, what his odds would be, what the money would be of, him becoming the next Bears head coach. But there's no guarantee that he would even be available. So is it possible that there's a dark horse in this race that we just have not, talked about, or the media is not recognizing as, hey, this guy could potentially be the next Bears head coach? Certainly, that's always a possibility. But whether it's, Kevin Stefanski, who is still employed by the Cleveland Browns, whether it's Brian Daboll, who, we talked about in a previous episode, is there's no guarantee he's not coming back as the Giants head coach next season. I just think Vrabel is the guy. He's a great fit, regardless of, and I know a lot of people talk about, well, when you have a young quarterback, it's imperative that you get a young, quote-unquote, offensive genius, the next wonder kid, as an offensive coordinator to become the head coach and call the plays. Ultimately, I think what the Bears need is just some strong leadership, which they have been lacking for a long time now. And if they are able to land Mike Vrabel and keep this roster, at least for the next season or two, relatively intact, I think the sky's the limit for them. But, again, that's a big if they are able to land Mike Vrabel. I think that's their best move. And if I'm Ryan Poles, I think you have to look at that as that's your only move.